Deep, resounding ire. Well, if that's how you feel, then I don't care. What's going on? Whoever. Peeps. We could say peeps, I guess. 2 videos in 1 week? Holy shit, brother. What's going on? Well, I don't know what's going on, but I have been trying to... Okay, alright. Because it's like, Mr. Repeat himself, why don't you repeat yourself? To get to the core of this myth that we're working on, that I'm working on, it requires so much puzzling things together, finding the absolute truth of why things are happening, because everything's so interconnected into each other that as we seem to explore the imagination of our mind and go off and in la la land or whatever and unravel things with stream of consciousness, right? I always am left with this massive amount of stuff to go through and think about. For a long time, the mythology has grown and grown and grown, and it started off on a planet called Yuandra, and I was like, oh, this is a fantasy and all that, and then it's kept growing. I'm like, okay, so this is bigger than a fantasy because there's so much shit happening. And then it kept growing beyond that, and all of a sudden we're talking about the astral realm, we're starting to talk about the AOC, this realm that is the internal, what would you say, like organs blown out from Harius and created a realm, right? Now we're getting esoteric, and so we go beyond that and we try to discover the past of who Harius was. And as you're going to find out in the Forgotten series and the Harius Codex, where that originated, and it gets very earthly, but then it gets astral again. So we have this realm called Yuandra. Think of it like fucking Middle Earth. And then all of a sudden, we go through the astral and we find out, oh, this all comes back to Earth again. But then we got to go back even further and get back from the astral and into the realm of the unknown. And this realm of the unknown is a mythological realm that the Greek myths, the Vedic, the Celtic, you know, where all these myths come from. This realm, the mythological age, that is such a mystery to us that 90% of people write it off, and then fucking 5% think it's 100% truth, and then maybe fucking 3% of those people have their own weird definition of it, and so it's really foggy, right? There's so much to unravel. And so to understand my myth and to get back to that point, I have to kind of look around the mythological cycle of the Greeks, the Vedics, how you even say that, I don't know, but Indian and Hindu myth, and getting into this Aryan myth, you know, this Indo-European stuff and how it's all connected from that point. And so we're starting to see how this is coming together, right? I've talked to you in the past about the floodgates, and for me, again, I'm sure people forgot about it, so I guess I'll reiterate. Transcendence to a different realm, I'm using in my myth as something called floodgates, which is basically, if you look at the history of the world, you look at mythology, a lot of mythologies talk about a great flood in their own way, and how the whole of the fucking world was wiped out from this flood and it had to like restart. Well, I'm thinking that's transcendence. That's realm transcendence from states of mind and consciousness, because there's got to be a survivor, and they built from that point. And whether you believe it in an esoteric way or not, let's pretend that the biblical flood myth is 100% real. Well, all of mankind was wiped the fuck out and we restarted from one man and his family. That's consciousness brought back to a singular form and broken out from it. You know what I'm saying? Even at its basic idea. So I'm thinking of all these things, right? I'm like puzzling it all together in my head, because not only am I trying to unravel those myths, but how do mine work in relation to it? How does this all kind of tie into each other? Well, golly, I don't necessarily know. But it's it's piling together in such a way where I have the evidence. I don't want to say that. I have the theories all laid around here, and I'm just piecing it together. How does this paper fit with this paper, and how does that one fit with this stack here, and how can I make all this work together so I can tell a proper myth? Well, I couldn't necessarily even tell you what a myth was for the longest time, and as we keep moving and moving and moving, we realize that mythology is how mankind seeks to understand himself. And a lot of the times when stories keep moving over and over again, things fall into the realm of myth because it gets to the point where on the oral tradition, certain things might have been forgotten here, certain things exaggerated there. Doesn't necessarily take away from the truth of it. For instance, Homer's The Iliad. Well, when you start realizing that that really happened, well, maybe Achilles and Ajax and Odysseus and Agamemnon don't exactly exist in the same way. Let's go to Achilles. I don't know if he was a demigod, but his father was a god. Maybe that isn't exactly true, but what lies underneath that? Okay. I might have lost a lot of people. I might have gained a few people. Whatever. We're going to keep moving. This is how life works, guys. Now, okay, we think in that terms. So let's think even bigger than that, because I don't want to zoom in too much there. Let's look at the Olympian gods of Greek mythology. This is not a crazy theory at all, but I'm thinking, what if those are just representations of higher beings, higher versions of ourselves that we would consider like godlike? Imagine an Aboriginal that's never seen technology, and you show them your technology, you would come across as a bit of a higher being, would you not? Maybe it has something to kind of go around with that. Then when you start opening the doors to Indo-European stuff, you start unraveling Aryanism. You start unraveling this Brahmins, and it was like Manu was trained by that. Druids, Chaldeans, I can't remember the other ones, but these priestly class of people, these higher people. Then you start unraveling Scythian stuff, and you start finding out about the Scythian Empire. You start looking into Goths. You start like seeing all this crazy shit. Like, oh my God, there was a high group of people that just fanned out and became Irish, and became Saxons, like way down the line, I know, and became Greeks, and I forgot what they're called, but the Aryan Indians, and other tribes and stuff. They all spread the fuck out, and then we all kind of forgot we were unified and separated, and now Norse people are different than Irish people, right? It's a lot to really wrap your head around. It really is. There's a channel that really does a really good job of explaining this, and it's Asha Logos. I will try my best to remember to put that in the description. But that does a very good job explaining this kind of Aryanism, right? So that's something else. It's just these groups of people, and what does it all represent? What does it all represent? What does it all represent? So that's all swirling in my head, and that's our history as human beings. But then I got to kind of jump out of that gear and go into my mythological gear. And that is flood stuff. That is Dove and Theis and Oapake and Eris and Nacum and all these characters. But it all kind of came back, as you know, with the myth that I'm doing, it's going backwards right now instead of forward. Merely because the author has to discover what it is. Like, why is everything meant to be? And I got to this point where Dove will eventually come face to face with who he's told is a flood survivor. It's going to be its own little story. We'll get to that point. And this flood survivor tells him of a world that existed before. But that's when I had to say, time out. What the fuck does that mean? What's the world before? What does that even mean? And I don't understand what that is. So I kind of had to stop and reflect on these ideas. And what is a flood survivor? It says this reoccurring myth, this is my thing, okay? This reoccurring myth can be found throughout all the forgotten myth, which is my myth. It is the event that leads from one realm to the next. For the proposal is the flood is a fulfillment of a prophecy, one that a being must create an ark that will take him to the next realm. This next level of understanding, this concept, is more of consciousness rather than real physical world stuff. Though the ark is also somewhat of a physical device, it is my belief that one major reason man cannot find Eden or any other religious realm through history was because it hides in the previous realm, one that was born on some physical plane. And as man now finds himself in Ur-Mind, this is the sacred land man would inhabit once the flood was abated. This can be discovered in the story of Gilgamesh, where he goes off to discover immortality. And along the way, he meets a flood survivor. And that flood survivor's name was Utnapishtim. I'm sorry, I don't know. Can't pronounce it. And this flood survivor tells him in some sense that he builds the ark because it was whispered by Enki. And after this, the survivor did as he was told. It was like told to him by Enki. And then I thought there was a guy that got mad about that. Or was that the other one? I don't remember. And thus he was granted life forever by the Creator as a reward, and it would never happen again. The flood was not to erase mankind. It was to move a chosen one to the next realm, and from his mind born that next place. Thus we see it echoed in Noah. For it is his descendants that eventually are the central point of their story. The Jewish mind and all that fall into it, even those Christians. It is a device of consciousness that holds the mind of those beings, a device that is controlled by the chosen destiny. So in my myth, Theis will be no different when he discovers the flood survivor, or will Dove, because I don't necessarily know right now. The flood, reset of the dream realm. Theis, he seeks to command the flood when it is discovered in the library of Bhavan. He wishes to control the survivor and thus dictate what consciousness carries over. Dove tries to subvert the flood, wishes to hide the pieces, plant riddles, so that memory and identity slip through the cracks of Theseus' will. Because as the mythology goes on, there's always a confliction, as like we've been not so subtly hinting at, between the two dragons, Dove and Theis. There's always going to be a battle of wills, of an idea. Theis represents order. He represents the idea of restoration and creation and unity and the idea of building, whereas Dove is always going to represent discovering and remembering. So it's like, but why? If you were born in this realm here and you're supposed to remember, well, what if you were the one who left yourself the clues to try and remember? And so you're always going to be chasing that, I'm trying to remember what that was, or what was that, and it's yourself leaving clues along the way. Hence why in my mythology we're constantly going back, because we need to figure out what Dove needs to remember. Now, Harius is the vessel. So Harius in the Harius Codex is clearly the vessel, the ark itself. Not just as a survivor, but a vessel, built by design, filled with fragments of memory, meant to endure when the realm shifts. So we will then discover that the flood survivor's words are the song, for he echoes what was before, that man who carried the ark into the next realm. This, Dove sees as dangerous. Do not chase this dream, and eventually Theis will see this as proof that he must construct the ark and free his people into the next realm. Though there is no God that asks this of them, Theis will choose to himself find Harius, the human-turned replicant vessel. I know I'm saying a lot of things you don't necessarily know about now, but eventually you will, so you'll figure it out. Now, it comes to the point where Dove himself meets this flood survivor, so we want to focus more on Dove right now than Theis. And I was just like, who the fuck is this guy? And what does he want? What is he trying to do? There's a story of Dove and Theis that goes way back, before Harius' discovery. Again, we're going farther back into time. Dove and Theis are in the astral realm, and Yuandra creating a planet. All of a sudden now Dove went off and he discovered Harius, which everything's in the side of his mind. Well, what's before that? Well, that's the story of Dove and Thiis and the Titans and the shit they were doing here on our planet. And so, if you can see what I'm saying, it's like, that's how this myth shit works for me. I'm doing that, and in the same fucking time, I'm over here trying to fucking unravel real life mythology. And what is that exactly saying? How are we able to find this? In trying to seek the flood to our understanding, this is what we come to so far. Mainly that the flood is a transcendental process, one that is begun with the one being that would begin the process of that consciousness. Example, Noah and the Sumerian flood survivor, the guy with the U name. These beings hold the foundation that would become the vessel of thought. Now there are two options here. One, that these are hijacked and recreated to fit a narrative, i.e. the Jewish mindset. Or this is a process that carries forth different survivors, and this would explain the different stocks in the world, how we truly are different, like groups of people and stuff. I would tend to float towards the latter in this equation, but it would not surprise me if the former was true as well. Basically what I'm saying here is, like, I'm saying there's a tendency to want to say that this is evil and dark, you know, this Jewish conspiracy stuff where, you know, whatever, go down that road if you want. I was like, I don't know. I mean, wouldn't be shocked if I discovered that, but I'm not really going to, like, hang my hat on it. So I said, this kind of, to me, explains that the reason that there are so many flood stories outside of cultural exchange and influence, like outside of that, would tell me that that's obviously there's just different groups of people, different races and different people that all come from different areas. So let's pause with that idea and go mythological. And I said, well, then that means they each have their own way they got to this realm in a consciousness idea, and that's through the flood. So if there indeed was a flood that ravaged the world, I highly doubt there was only one survivor, but maybe groups of people, and then it was like a restart. If we're going to go mythological, okay? I'm not saying this is historical. Again, you're watching a channel about a myth, all right? I hope I get that through when I keep talking like this. So, where did I stop? Yes. Now, these are mythic fathers of the rebirth, and in some sense, a fractal nature of a higher being, one that we cannot call at this time. So we have to refer to this as a last source, or remnant that would be equivalent to Harius. These beings are born from Harius, going back to our myth, and we shall think of them so far in terms of Thiis, Dove, and Oapake. These are the highest beings that I'm covering that exist from post-flood in Yuandra and all that. So clearly Thiis and Dove, because they were the motherfuckers that it started with, and all their little Titan friends. So clearly that was it. Oapake comes later in the story, and you'll come to it. And so I'm just saying, well, from this point on, how can I get, how do you say that? Ziusudra? I don't know. The one from, is it Akkadian or Sumerian? One of them. The Flood Myth Survivor. Manu, which is of the Hindu one. And then you have Deucalion, which is the Greek flood survivor with the woman. And they have to throw the rocks behind him, the bones of mother and all that. So I'm just, in my mind, I'm trying to piece this all together. You know, one represents the rebirth, the vessel of memory. One is rebuilding the form, the flood of form, and descended into the flood of self. And these are ideas of transcendence through vessels. So if Harius is the god mind that ends up creating Yuandra, so i.e. example, imagine that the people in Middle-earth discover that they exist inside the mind of Tolkien, and they look at him like the fucking creator. That's all I'm saying there. Well, shit. Where does he exist? And we're just going back. So how are we born and enter into realms from one to another? You know, we want to believe with science that there are multitudes of different dimensions, as they'll call it. How are those created? How much does thought have to play with that? If I sit and imagine in a made-up place, does it come into being in some other realm that I can't simply understand? Or Am I making it all up? And it's nothing. It doesn't mean anything. The latter would not surprise me, but I'm hoping it's the former. You know what I mean? So that's just where we are in all that. And how do we create this? How is Oapig the holy diver of Harius? And you're probably going like, the who, the what? It's just a lot of shit. It's just a fuck ton of stuff, and it's I really couldn't tell you why this has to be this way. I'd rather it be easy and I just write the fucking story and it's done and I can just be like over with this and move on with my life. But for whatever fucking reason, I am not allowed to. This myth, I'm thinking, oh, we'll just work on it, we'll figure it out. And it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And all of a sudden, I'm just like so into this thing that I'm sitting here having to research my own fucking stuff. I have a file cabinet. I shoved it in that goddamn closet back there because I was like intimidated by it. And I don't have a lot of room anymore. And I was just trying to figure this shit out. And it was filling that son of a bitch up, unraveling all this. I have papers everywhere, like all over the fucking place, of just like me writing stuff down and trying to figure this out, trying to figure it out, trying to keep it all. Wait a minute, that leads to this, and that leads to that, and this leads to this, and boom, 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 boom. And then all of a sudden, it's like we're fucking 50 meters deep into this son of a bitch, and we're like, oh, okay, still keeps going. Holy shit. The roadmap was and always will be real life mythology, because there's a reason that it exists. There's a reason that we feel the way we feel about it. More than connecting back to your ancestors. There's something mighty in this. And I think I gave an example some time ago. For me, mythology is a different way of remembering a real life event. Remember what I said about Troy? My example was, you wait, man, 1,000 years from now, 1,000 years from now, we will forget about the Chernobyl incident that happened. But you know damn well, because it's entertaining, people won't forget Stalker. The video game, there's books about it and stuff. No one will forget that because it's entertaining. It's fun to do. You know, no one likes to remember history because history is boring, but if we have stories, those are fun. All of a sudden, people are going to want to know, like, oh, this stalker shit is obviously stupid and like, it's not real. It was a fantasy they told themselves back then. But they have no idea that it was inspired by real life events of Chernobyl. Do you know what I'm saying? So the cultural part inside of it and the historical part are hiding inside the myth. That you know will happen, and I'm sure there's a million others. You know, cowboys and Indians. Like, that's just a myth that exists because those were just cowboy and Indian movies. And so, like, no, but it's inspired by real life events. So there is some truth in it. This guy did exist, but this is a character of him, you know, things like that. That's what I believe the Iliad and the Odyssey are. It's like, this really did happen, but like it's, oh no, these are just stories that poets told for fucking purposes, you know. Or like, when you think of like Celtic, so like the Mabinogi, oh, those are just like bardic stories that they're praising people, and that's all bards did. They were praising guys, and it was a whole political thing. It's like, yeah, maybe, but maybe there's something more to those stories, right? There's some myths hide real life events, because all a myth is these were the old entertainments that we had, now lost to time and forgotten exactly why, and now we just forget the point of it. And that's how people are. You know that's true. So for me, it's like going through myths is like trying to say what was really there, though. If this is the myth, like, it's not like interpreting it in a spiritual way. It's interpreting it in a way of a human being. Like, what does it really say? What really probably happened here? And what does that represent? And I think that will lead us back to a time where we won't even believe. We will confuse those people that we used to be as gods because they were so different. We can't grasp that right now, but I think that in time we will have to if we want to understand who we are and why we're here. And that's all I'm trying to do with the myth, is unravel those two very questions. I've said this before, my mythology is me taking my mind out and placing it in front of someone else and saying, this is the vessel that I've used to understand this, do with it what you will. But as a representation of our time. Because I feel like that's my duty, right? As someone who writes, you know, you gotta have the ego to think, well, people need to hear this. I don't know. Or not, man. Or I'm just making this shit up and it's all a fucking lie. I don't goddamn know. As I always say, wouldn't surprise me if it was. You know, I don't want it to be, but if it was, it wouldn't shock me. It's another fucking joke that this world is, I guess. I don't want to believe that, though. I want to believe that there's a purpose, you know? But anyway, I think we'll call it. And we will go off and maybe try to work on something tomorrow. What do we have to work on? Oh, starting the next Harrius episode. So we gotta work on that. That'll be fun. That'll be super fun. We might get half that done tomorrow. We shall see. But I will see you in the next one.